And hello and welcome to AleksTabletops MTG Sets Studies Session 142 Part 2. So yeah, we're continuing studying Magic the Gathering sets. My name is Alex, this is Buddy, and let's just go and basically continue. So today's session started a little bit later. I had to do a couple of things related to art. So yeah, so go. So let's just figure out where the last what is the last card that we stopped with. The last card that we stopped with was Anti-Magic Aura. So let's just find it and move to it. Okay, things are quite overloaded. Hopefully, it's not going to result in any problems. So yeah, continue with Legends and Anti-Magic Aura. So the reason why I decided to stop with this card, by the way, let's check the sound. Go. So, okay, sound works good. And let me do a couple of things and should it continue. So one of the reasons why I decided to basically stop on this card, because again, we had to stop somewhere. This session is again going to be rather short, for about an hour. Okay, enchanted creature can't be the target of spells and can be enchanted by other auras. So again, the reason why I decided to stop with this card, because I saw a interesting type of potential in this card in regards to how you could apply an aura that could by itself restrict placing other auras on a creature. So this is actually a pretty interesting restriction that I like kind of, I don't know, for some reason decided to go through and add. So let's just add this one into intellectual map and think about it. What we could get out of this in terms of the specification, because again, we don't want to change in the aura aspect, because again, this is a specific thing that helps me to understand how exactly to add specifications. Again, when we'll go through the draft, we'll understand where exactly this mechanic potentially could fit. But at this point, I believe it just needs to be here because I see potential in it. And as I said before, if I see potential in something, I'd rather have it than not have it. So this is exactly what I'm trying to do here. So, okay. So again, enchanted creature can't be the target of spells and can't be enchanted by other auras. So the cool thing about this, like in general, this one is just works like a regular aura. Nothing special about it. It's just a truly regular aura. It doesn't. It's not doing anything else but just basically enchanting another creature, basically putting another permanent, and then taking certain effect. But what it does in it, which is pretty cool, it basically creates a restriction on placing other auras. So let's just first add this one. So let's just aura that adds restriction on the target, like not allowing this creature to be enchanted by other auras. So yeah, this is basically what it does. Kind of creates this pretty interesting restriction. We could basically add any type of restriction. Yes, we could use truly any type of restriction. Any type of restriction or restrictions. Let's put restriction or restrictions. So we could use any type of restriction. So again, like for instance, it can't be the target of instants and sorceries, something like this. It can be the target of other abilities of other creatures, so something like this. For instance, can't can be the target or can't be targeted by, for instance, buffs or instants or sorceries. Buffs, instants, or sorceries in general. So again, we could add different type of specifications. So this is the reason why I decided to basically put this one into actual mob, because I see a pretty interesting potential in it in regards how it could be replaced. Like for instance, right here again, it can't be enchanted by other auras, but we could change this, and by putting this enchantment on a creature that also prohibits or basically adds another restrictions to this creature, such as it can be targeted by buffs or just instants or sorceries, because instants or sorceries could target not only to buff, of course, to kill, to do something else, so etc. So this is basically it. Buffs, what else? Other abilities. Other abilities such as entering the battlefield. Like for instance, when creatures entering the battlefield, give other creature, which could be this creature, like buff +2/+2. It's not necessarily an instant or sorcery, it's more like it's just a triggered ability. Other triggered abilities. Entering battlefield. It's pretty hard to generalize this mechanic. I mean, in general, it could just be by placing this card, by attaching this card to a creature, for instance. If we'll think about the general terms, not necessarily magic terms, we could think about this one from the standpoint of creating restrictions. So again, we could use any type of restrictions, and because we're thinking about magic at this point, it's better to specify it in magic terms. But when we will go through the generalizations, through the multiple drafts, I believe we will come up with something much more general, which is basically will destruct this from magic and will point towards something a little bit more generic that could be used in other games. But at this point, as an inspiration, of course, but at this point, it's better to stick to something that we know, of course, which is the whole point of the pre-draft thing. Because again, this is kind of considered a first uncategorized draft, but I would also call it a pre-draft, something like this. Yeah, let's just call it a first draft instead of first draft and uncategorized. Let's just call it pre-draft. It's just better, or another way is categorized, because it doesn't have any categories. We're just putting one mechanic by mechanic that like on top of each other. Okay, we could use any type of restrictions. Can be targeted by buffs, instant sorceries, other triggered abilities entering the battlefield, or already existing on the battlefield. So again, triggered abilities could be triggered, of course, if a creature already is in play. So for instance, if we decide to put a creature that could potentially target this creature that has restrictions on it, it can do it by entering the battlefield and then targeting it. And also already existing on a battlefield is, for instance, if something will trigger some type of a creature and its ability reads that we could target another creature and do something with it. It can't do that. So this is actually a pretty interesting thing, because in general we have a couple of abilities in Magic, for instance, that prohibits us from targeting certain like creatures with disabilities. So we have hexproof, and we have shroud. So hexproof is, as I remember, it basically works like we can target this card that has a hexproof. We could put buffs on it, we could put auras on it, we could do anything with it that we could do with a regular creature. But if we have a creature with shroud, we can't do so as the opponent can do anything about it. So it just basically stays as just a regular creature with shroud that cannot be targeted with anything, no matter what it is. So it just can be the target of spells, abilities, or whatever. When hexproof allows us to target this creature, but opponents can't target our creature, or permanents that opponents controls cannot target it. So with this ability, it's kind of a little bit more specified version probably of either hexproof or shroud. Just basically a lot of like just a little bit more targeted version of this. So because of this, let's just add this one. So a specific target version of hexproof. Specific so-called, because I need to know where I'm coming from when I'm putting this mechanic in here. So version of hexproof, just pretty awesome mobility / shroud, or shrewd that I called it before. Shrewd, I believe it's like this. Let's see if we're right. Yep, Pilina.
Shroud.
So yeah, it's basically shroud. Version of hexproof or shroud. So again, when hexproof and shroud is basically just overall. With this, I'm thinking about it a little bit more specific. So because of this, basically, and it also not necessarily gives a creature something like just a permanent ability, but it also works as long as this aura is attached to it, which is again interesting like thing too. So it's just basically a permanent. But we could think about it as a permanent or not as a permanent. So again, there's so many specifications in here we could add. We could think about it, about restrictions as permanents or temporaries, which is I don't believe that we need to put this information in here, because in most cases it's just something that logically already has to be clear. You could think about restrictions as permanent or temporary. Temporary. As attachments. This is what I mean by permanent and temporary. Attachments or buffs. So again, if it's just gonna be a buff, then we have to set a limit for as long, like as how long this buff is gonna work, like the time restrictions, I would say, not a limit. So when it comes down to the buffs, it's just basically until the end of turn, or on like 5 turns this ability is working. After 5 turns it basically disappears. So something like this. So this is the reason. So yeah, that's it. So attachments is just much easier as long as this card is attached to it, as long as it attached. And with buffs, for how long turns My voice is kind of weird today. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm not sleeping that well lately. My vocal cords are not restoring themselves well. Either way. So yeah, let's just move on to the next one, because again, we could sit on this one for quite a while. It's just not. So enchanted creature can be targeted spells or abilities, and can be enchanted, or it can be enchanted, can be the target of spells. So you see, it does both things. Can be the target of spells, which is kind of works as, it doesn't specify what type of spells. It means that it can be the target of spells, which means that it already works like a hex, like a shroud. So I believe this card is actually the beginning of the shroud ability, and then they decided, okay, let's just call it a shroud, because again, it kind of works pretty similarly, but just a little bit more specific, not necessarily as a shroud. So again, with shroud, you're not going to be able to even target it with anything, so it can be targeted with anything. But right here, with only spells, and can be enchanted by auras, so kind of two things. But it still can be targeted by other activated abilities or whatever, which is again, which makes it less, I would say, no. Just a little bit more specified. Continue. So creatures can't attack a player unless that player casts a spell or put a non-token permanent onto the battlefield during their last turn. So this is actually pretty interesting too. So again, the funny thing is that right now I'm planning to launch at some point, maybe this year, maybe at the beginning of the next year, a new series on AleksTabletops that basically going to work with restrictions, with creating your own restrictions, putting those restrictions in Magic Arena, like either forced restrictions or logical restrictions. Logical restrictions are all restrictions that will be set by the game itself, and forced restrictions, this is something that we're gonna set by ourselves, and we will try to stick to them. And the whole point of the series is basically going to be called Thematic Plus, and the whole point of the series is going to be again to create a thematic deck around certain type of restrictions, build this deck around those restrictions. I still don't know when exactly I'm going to build this deck, during the episode or outside of the episode, and then discuss how I build it. We'll see. I believe in order to save time and make these episodes a little bit more dynamic, it's better to actually build the deck outside of the episode and then discuss it, how I build it and what I put inside of it, because I built my first deck based on restrictions and it took me like a couple of hours. So because of this, it's better to actually probably build those decks outside of this outside of the episode. So regardless, it's funny thing that we are right now talking about restrictions in here, and I also working on creating a restriction decks out there for those episodes, which is pretty cool. It's kind of an unrelated thing, but at the same time it's pretty cool. So because of this, right now I'm pretty stoked about everything that works with restrictions. So again, we have restrictions from here, we also have restrictions in here. That creatures can't attack a player unless the player casts a spell or puts a non-token permanent into the battlefield during their last turn. So basically, it's a pretty interesting. The funny thing is that this is an enchantment that basically works on the world itself. We already talked about world enchantments before. This is something that we have in our probably regular specifications. Let's see, it's probably Magic Course. We have zones, we have resources, deck building, no. Actions, no. The types of spells, I believe. We have zones, resources, mechanics, rules, matchups, card types. So yeah, I have card types. These are all basic card types that I found in the game. Some of them are just wasn't implemented in the game once and never repeated. Some of them was used during just one set, and that's it. Some of them a little bit more consistent. So in terms of the auras, again, we have a creature aura, basically aura that could enchant a creature. We have aura that could enchant a wall, artifact, enchantment, land, planeswalker, permanent card in the graveyard, or library, your library or opponent's library. Probably even an enchantment that could enchant your own hand, like card in your hand, but again, this is something a little bit different. We also have an enchant player, which is basically usually works like a curse. You cursing is one specific player, attaching this auras on a specific player, basically like a curse. And we also have a world enchantment. So nowadays this thing is just not used. It's just a regular enchantment that works on all players. It doesn't specify what exactly harm or the opposite of harm. Whatever. So what good about this and what's bad about this is basically, if it's not specified, then it's probably a world enchantment. So again, enchant world. Also, how this effect is going to behave itself, so either one directional effect or target effect, or like multiple target effect. So basically this one, of course, affects on all. This one affects only opponent or certain effects like creatures or our hand or whatever, so basically targeted effect, or one directional effect, which is again on us or on our opponent again too. So again, there's multiple things that we could think about this, like, and at some point when we will go through the drafts, this is basically how we're gonna think about maybe even categorizing those. But at this point, let's just move on. So the last thing, so again, with world enchantment, it means this is just basically creates a restriction for everything. Our creatures, so as the opponent's creatures, can't attack a player unless that player that they potentially want to attack cast a spell or put an on-token permanent into the battlefield during the return. So this restriction is circumstantial, which is pretty cool. We already talked about circumstantial stuff in general, but I don't believe that we talked about circumstantial restrictions, which is something that we actually could put in here as a specification. So let's think. Creatures can't attack a player unless that player casts a spell or put a non-token permanent into the battlefield during their last turn. So again, it implies action from that player's behalf. If opponent performed a certain type of action, then this restriction is in place or not performed. So let's just add this one as a specification. So again, restriction based, but circumstantial, I don't know how it works, the spelling probably the wrong, circumstantial, maybe this. Okay, let's see. Again, learning English at the same time, which is cool. Circumstantial, yeah, C, not S. Обстоятельственные. Да, so it all depends on circumstances. A circumstantial restriction, which basically means that something has or had to happen in order for this restriction to be active. So again, in our instance, we have unless. like unless. So creatures can attack a certain player unless that player casts a spell or put in a token permanent. So again, if opponent doesn't have anything to play, it means that this opponent is safe from attacks, which is actually pretty cool. I mean, this is actually pretty cool enchantment. Like for instance, if you don't have like good things to put in play, you're just gonna put lands in play until you will get to this card, and no one is going to be able to attack you. So it's actually pretty awesome, like card on its own. But again, what else we could add as a specification here? So again, of course, the can't aspect or can could be anything. Circumstantial restrictions. We also could think about allowance. Not allowance. Allow. I don't know how, like if it's actually the proper word used here. Hopefully it is. No. Yeah, it's more like, yeah, I'm thinking about this, like, by allowance I mean, no, not as a verb, an amount of something that is permitted, especially within a set of regulations or for a specified purpose. Yeah, we could think about allowance as this. It's might like in general terms, not like the actual sum of money regulators allowance. So no, we're gonna think about allowance as just like the allowing or regulating something. So again, either a restriction or the allowance of something to happen. So in this particular instance, has to happen. So what it means is, well, of course, right here we have a restriction, but we could add this one. Creatures can attack a player unless something happens. So, which basically kind of a different look on it. Kind of weirdly could have a positive description, but negative effect, or the negative description and positive effect, right? Like with this one. So we have a negative description, creatures can't attack unless player blah 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 blah, and this is actually a positive description, or negative description, positive effect, because it's for us positive. If we don't play anything, opponent can attack us, if I understand it right properly. So again, what else we could add as a specification here? So again, circumstantial restriction / allowance. Something has or had to happen in order for this restriction to be active / inactive. Again, in allowance or restriction, whatever. And another thing that we could add right here is the element of choice. The element of choice to come on, the element of choice to set or not set this in motion. So, like, if we don't want to play something, or something like this, like cost. Let's just think about this specific example. Player cast a spell. So again, the element of choice to set or not to set, or not to set this in motion. Like for instance, if we don't want to cast something, we're just not gonna cast it, and as a result, it's not going to be set in motion, or it will in this particular instance. So again, pretty interesting one. Continue, or we have to move on because again, it's pretty slow lately with the new set. Like a lot of new things. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this one unless you pay 3 of different colors, the specific manas. Each untapped creature you control gets +0/+2 as long as it's not attacking, and also by paying 1 you could make add another one into its defense, like into its power. It's pretty interesting, but it's a freaking crazy spell by itself. I mean, cost 8, like double mana for each of this is just basically outlandish. It's just, come on, it's crazy. No one will be able to play this one probably, unless you have like super like awesomely mana fixed deck. Either way, I don't believe that we need to put this one because again, besides the fact that it's pretty costly and pretty big, and at the beginning of your upkeep you have to sacrifice it unless you pay something. So again, in order to maintain the balance, it also creates a permanent effect that gives all of your creatures that are in defense and also are not attacking, which is pretty interesting. I mean, each untapped creature you control gets +1/+, as long as it's not attacking. Because if this creature, for instance, could have vigilance and will attack, it could still have this additional thing. So adding, and as long as it's not attacking, also fights vigilance too. So it only works in defense, which is actually pretty cool. Do I see something in it to put it into intellectual map? Let's think about it. Each untapped creature you control gets +0/+2 as long as it's not attacking. So like this in general thing, you have to pay something in order to keep it in play. 100% skipping it. It's regular, it's generic, we already covered it multiple times, nothing special about it. When it comes down to the buff for additional price, covered it. One thing that I'm interested in is this, like each untapped creature you control gets +0/+2 as long as it's not attacking. So it's pretty similar to the restriction that we established like before. It seems like Legends has a lot of cards that work with restrictions, because this is another card that basically, as long as it's not attacking, each untapped creatures will get something. So you will get something as long as certain circumstances will be met. So because of this, I believe we don't need to put this information in here. The only cool thing about this is like specific phrasing that could affect the general rules of Magic, because in order for a creature to attack, it has to be tapped. So it's just basically like the wordplay in this particular instance, and understanding and being familiar with Magic, and like understanding vigilance, and because creatures could be untapped while attacking. So it's just basically a wordplay in this particular instance. But besides that, it's a pretty generic ability. Continuing. Legendary creatures don't untap during their control as untap step, another restriction. And when Arena enters the battlefield, this one, tap all legendary creatures. This is interesting. So first, it adds the ability that legendary creatures don't untap. And then when it enters the battlefield, it also taps all legendary creatures. So if creature has vigilance, it doesn't matter without the second thing. But with this second thing, even if creature has vigilance, it will tap all legendary creatures, which is actually pretty cool. So again, another wordplay when it comes down to restrictions. I don't believe that we need to set this one into intellectual map. There's no need to add this one because legendary creatures don't untap during their control and tap steps. Just again, we already covered like this function of don't untap during their controls and tap step, I believe. Let's just see if we have this information or not. Find replace. It's probably not here. Yep, not here. Probably here. Yeah, mechanics. Okay, done on top. That's probably something that it could find. Seriously, no? Apparently we don't have done on top. Let's just try to find top then. Maybe just tap. Okay, we haven't tapped. Each four chooses one untapped creature they control. Players skip one of their turn steps. Untap, draw. Effects of above based on an tapped creature. Okay, tap enchanted creature doesn't untap during its control untap step. I actually have this information, but for some reason I didn't found it. Why? Maybe because of the phrasing. Either way, so yeah, we have this one. So enchanted creature has this one. So it's not necessarily an enchantment creature. You could think about just top target creature. You have the ability to do exactly that. And we also could add a specification that it doesn't untap during its control as untap step. So it's never gonna untap unless we will untap it on our own with a different type of card or ability. So yeah, we have two of them. Right here it works with enchantment. Right here it works with just by additional effect. Moving on. And again, this one is just basically make sure that everything, like every legendary creature, is going to be tapped. So again, like specific targeting in here. Another restriction. Okay, counter target instant or aura spell that targets a permanent you control. So again, specific answer, a specific circumstantial answer right here. So counter target instant or aura spell. It's basically a generic ability, targeted but still generic, and that targets a permanent you control. It's just basically a specific thing. So it's not gonna be able to target, counter target spells that target us. Or our spells. So it's not going to be able to counter other counter spell, for instance. So yeah, skipping. Whenever a creature dealt damage by this creature this turn dies, you gain 1 life, and this card basically deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker. So again, whenever creature dealt damage, I believe I already covered something similar. Definitely believe that something like this we already have it. It's pretty generic, like whenever a creature dealt damage by this turn dies. So you get benefits from something regular. Yeah, definitely covered it. I have a pretty big kind of a category of getting benefits from something that just regularly has to happen, but instead of it, you will gain additional thing from it. So for instance, if creature died, like for instance right here, yes, if a creature dealt damage by this card dies, you will gain life, and this one deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker. So again, it's just adding an additional effect to a regular thing in Magic that happens constantly, like creatures dying. But right here it just basically creates an additional effect if this specific creature killed that creature. Or not necessarily killed, because again, it could be a combination. As long as it dealt damage, and even if it didn't die at the beginning, but then it died this turn, other way, like by sacrificing it or dealing additional damage with a different type of spell or whatever, it still works, which is pretty cool. Okay, we covered banding. Counter target activated ability from an artifact source unless that ability controller space 1. Okay, another one, like, seems pretty complicated, but it's actually not. Mana abilities can't be triggered, which is actually a pretty cool thing. So, counter target activated ability. So yeah, this is just a specific for Magic, so again, usually mana ability is also an activated ability. Because of this, Magic has a lot of kind of specifications that if something describes that activated ability can be countered, we also need to add a specification that mana abilities can't be targeted in order to not create a confusion in here. So this is just basically it. Let's check the sound. This is just a specific for Magic, so again, usually... Okay, it's fine. So I don't believe that we need this one. So again, it's just a specific target, a counter target spell. But instead of a spell, this card allows a counter target activated ability from a specific artifact source unless that ability controls space 1. So it's pretty regular counter spell actually. Yeah. Magic has a lot of those. Like a lot of those, even right now. Counter target spell unless it controls space, whatever. So let's just find our counter spells and add this information there. Counter target spell, you have the ability to cancel the spell that opponent is playing or you're playing. Counter target spell unless opponent will pay certain costs. Yeah, we covered mana or else. And target can be any type of card, generic or specific, or ability. Let's just add this information. It can be any type of card, spell, or ability. We could even like counter target a triggered abilities, which is again an additional thing counter spells could do. Continuing, regular Drake. By the way, this is exactly the same Drake that I'm familiar with. Azure Drake, let's see how it looks. Does it have... Yep, remember that one. I even have it in my collection. In real collection. It's still there. Okay, continuing. So choose a player who cost 1 or more sorcery spells this turn, and blackout deals damage to the player equal to the half of the damage dealt by one of those sorcery spells this turn, rounded down. Again, seems like complicated stuff, but in general I believe we already covered everything. So again, choose a player who cost 1 or more sorcery spells this turn. Again, if opponent performed a certain type of action, we can choose specifically this type of player that performed those type of actions, and then this card deals damage to that player that we chose, equal to half of the damage dealt by one of those sorcery spells this turn, rather down. So again, it's super mega specific spell in general. Like, if I'm being honest, this spell is just pointless unless we're playing against a direct damage decks that basically deal direct damage to us. Or to our creatures. So it's basically a card against burner spells that basically turns those burner spells back. And the more damage was dealt by those burners, the more damage rounded down we're gonna deal. Pretty interesting card in terms of what it's doing. It seems like generic, but I see potential in it. I see definitely something in it. I don't wanna miss on those opportunities when I feel something intuitively that it has. Let's just describe why I put this one. So choose a player who costs 1 or sorcery spell. So again, circumstantial. Already. Circumstantial targeting. So right here we're dealing with circumstantial targeting. So we can target creature only if specific action was performed. Can target only once at performed a specific action. Something that we will cover at some point. Can target only once that has or that performed specific that had performed specific action or actions. So again, it could be a combination of actions, not necessarily just one thing. So this is one thing from this spell, which is actually pretty cool. And the other one is generalize it as always. This card deals damage to that player equal to the half of the damage dealt by one of those sorcery spells this turn on the deal. The ability to turn attack or attacks into offense into a counterattack. And not just a regular counterattack, but delayed counterattack. Okay, delay. Yeah. The ability to turn attack or attacks into delayed counterattack. In this particular instance, this is exactly how this card works. Like, as a general explanation, what it does. So yeah, we have about 10 minutes to the end of the session, plus minus, so let's just quickly go through the cards. So enchant creature, whenever enchanted creature deals damage to you, this one deals that much damage to that creature's controller. So again, the same. A card that so this one creates a permanent counterattack effect, and this one creates a no, the opposite. This one creates a temporary counterattack, and this one creates a permanent counterattack, some sort of. So let's just add another specification based on can be set to be triggered every time or one time only. Like for instance, spell, instant or sorcery spell, something but sorceries, hopefully it's properly spelled, one time, and instant or sorcery spell just once, that's it. And right here is enchantment or aura or enchantment. No, let's just put enchantment or artifact. On a battlefield. Yep, enchantment or artifact on the battlefield. So pretty cool. Okay, continuing. Okay, regular creatures skipping, legendary creature human warriors skipping, vigilance. So again, we have vigilance in here. It's probably the first time that vigilance was added in the legends. Don't remember it before. So can't be target of our spells. So again, another restriction. This one gets +1/+1. So again, first it has protection. We covered any type of every type of protection or anything. So as long, in this particular instance, it has protection from red, but not from itself. As long as an opponent controls a non-token white permanent, this one also gets +1/+1. So again, circumstantial buff, but it's more like if controller has, as long as opponent controls a just white permanent, this creature gets something. This is actually a pretty commonly used ability in Magic. We'll probably want to add this one in a frequently used abilities. I definitely don't have it because this is truly pretty commonly used one. So as long as opponent controls a certain color, type, or whatever permanent, this is just a generic ability, and then we have a lot of like additional things. This creature gets a, like for instance, +X/+X. This is an example. These are all of your creatures gets a +X/+X, like an additional, and of course if not, when opponent no longer has this permanent, under its control, yeah, we're not going to put right here his or her, let's just under its control. The ability becomes inactive. Cool. Exactly. Cool. Okay, so yeah, pretty close to the end, so let's just go, let's decide what card we're gonna stop with. And also I want to count how many cards we went through today, because in previous session I went only through 15 cards in general, which I thought actually was pretty cool, but things are pretty slow. We have 300 cards and 50 cards per session. It's actually quite slow. But again, I can't make this much faster because I need to brainstorm every ability, and I need to brainstorm what I could gain from this ability. If I see potential in it, I don't want to skip it because I'm never gonna get back to it. I already talked about it multiple times. So I'm doing this once, and I'm never gonna get back to studying those cards ever again. So because of this, I need to approach this with accuracy, and even though process seems super slow, I can't have a choice. or I don't have a choice. Can't have a choice. I don't have a choice, truly, because this is the only way to do this, the proper way. Put a charge counter on a black mana battery. So we already talked about types of counters in a previous session, I believe. I don't believe that we have a charge one. So I also will try to establish all type of counters that we will encounter through Magic in order to analyze how we could work with counters in general. Let's find some loyalty counters. Somewhere there we have cage counters, bounty counters. So yeah, let's duplicate this one. Charge counter is one of those counters that's even used up to this day. So let's just describe it, how it works in order to generalize it. So remove any number of charge counters from this one and then add an additional for each charge counter. Oh yeah, so it basically has multiple ways of behaving. So charge counter. So the first one is remove any number of counters from black mana battery. Oh, snap. The wrong click, you gotta be kidding. The wrong combination of keys, yes. And then add an additional black for each charge counter you remove this way. So remove any number of charge counters from. It actually has usually three things. So pay additional cost, put an X amount of charge counters on this card. We also have the ability to remove charge counters. From this card, and basically it's gonna give you something. Gives you something. So again, this one creates a charge, the number of charges, and then it also produces a greater effect for each charge counter on it. I believe this is the way that most charge counters are working. Produces a larger effect for each charge counter on it or removed from it. So yeah, we will get back to charge counters multiple times because it's pretty interesting, like, to actually understand their overall behavior. But in general, Magic has a lot of things that work with charge counters. So yeah, we're pretty close to the end, so let's just find our stopping point and decide what card we're going to stop with. So let's just move through a couple of them. So again, when this one dies, it deals X damage to target creature, where X is the 3 plus the amount of damage dealt to blazing and effigy this turn by other sources named blazing effigy. What? Okay, this is actually a pretty awesome stop. We're gonna stop on this because I definitely need to spend more than 10 minutes to discuss this. So it basically creates a pretty interesting kind of cycle of things, and you could basically cycle through those cards, through those blazing effigies, and create a cycling effect of some kind. Something interesting. So this is going to be our last card for today, or this is going to be the next card for the next session. Cool. So yeah, that's it. So let's just save everything and finish on that note. So again, this is gonna be a slow process, but at least it's gonna be a process. So again, last session I decided to stream these MTG set study sessions without a web camera. It's just much more efficiently personally for me, and also it's pretty boring in general to study those sets, and when you look at the person typing stuff and that's it with one expression without like any reactions, it's just pretty boring. So in general, so I decided to whatever, let's just remove another problem on in my way, because again, for me personally, it's not that easy to stream with a web camera. Of course, it adds additional pressure, it adds additional kind of, I don't know, a negative effect to it when it's not necessary. If it's necessary, I'm fine with dealing with this effect. So for instance, I believe it's pretty necessary to have a web camera when you stream games that you react to. Like for instance, like stream for instance Magic Arena and act on certain type of situations and whatever, it's a pretty good thing. Or stream other games and react to the things happening in those games, it's fine. But when you're just studying something, having a web camera, it just seems weird, especially when you don't have an audience. Like for instance, I don't have a constant audience that's watching me, and it's just seems like a one-way street, and you're not necessarily getting anything out of it. So because of this, like having a web camera just for no one, it just seems weird. And as a result, I will still upload those sessions on YouTube in Full HD, and they will be. By the way, the funny thing is that a couple of months ago, I noticed that I'm streaming these sessions in Full HD, although my regular sessions in Magic Arena are 720p, not a Full HD, just regular HD. So it was a surprise for me personally, because especially like I decided to find a problem why this is happening. It turns out that OBS has a different type of codec that basically doesn't have the ability to change resolution into streaming separately from what you will have in your recording. So because of this, I'm streaming in the same kind of resolution as recording, just with a different bitrate. That's it. So streaming bitrate. So it's a pretty weird thing, but again, I can't change that because the old algorithm of decoding the codec for streaming didn't work. It created lags after I will upload those in YouTube, and basically I had to change it. So I can't go back to it. So apparently we're gonna stream in Full HD these sessions, which is fine. YouTube still has the possibility to change it into anything about like below 1080p. So yeah, this is it. So again, the next card we're going to continue with next session in 2 weeks, I guess. So again, the next week, as usual, we're gonna play MTG Study Magic Arena, and after that, we will. The week after, we will get back to MTG Set studies, of course, and we will continue with this card. So again, it's going to be a slow progression, but again, I want to make sure that AleksTabletops at this point is not going to be priority. I'm mostly spending time on creative stuff, so I'm getting back to creative stuff on full basis or constant basis. So because of this, I don't have that much time to spend on games in general. So because of this, I also want to stream much more casually everything that I'm doing with AleksTabletops and creating content also. There will be a couple of like different exceptions, like for instance this weekend planning to create a separate MTG special based on draft, and occasionally I will create those specials, but not more than that. And again, they will be created in a casual atmosphere, like whatever you have, like whatever you get, you will get. it's not gonna be like super perfect quality. If it's gonna go well, it's gonna go well. If it's not gonna go well, it's gonna go whatever it's gonna go. So I'm not going to try to perfect episodes for AleksTabletops, because in the end, this is just a way to have fun, relax, and just learn from games and apply those things that you learn from games in life, hopefully, if you will able to do so. If not, just distract ourselves and distract yourself, basically. I don't know. Do whatever you want to do during those sessions. So AleksTabletops gives me this freedom, because again, and the fact that I'm producing content while I'm doing this also gives me a lot of kind of cool things. So yeah, let's just end on this note. So again, I'm saying goodbye. Buddy says bye too. So again, I will continue to stream on AleksTabletops the way that I want to stream on AleksTabletops. I don't have a weird kind of idea to make this channel something big. It's gonna be the way that it's gonna be. It was awesome when Magic provided me with sponsored account a little bit earlier, well, a couple of weeks ago. It was awesome, but at the end of September, I believe, before the Thunderful Drain release, it was awesome, and I would definitely will be looking forward to those type of events. But it's still not gonna change how I'm going to create content, because in general, I'm doing this for myself. I'm doing this for specific reasons that I'm going to create again my own games in the future, and in the end, as a result, it always gonna comes down to art. So no matter what I'm doing here at AleksTabletops, it always going to culminate into art stuff. So what you seeing here at AleksTabletops, she's basically a prelude before we will get to the art stuff, and we'll create our own games, when we'll focus more on the artistic side of the games and less on the actual just experience. But again, the experience is also a part of the artistic intention. So, but again, this is kind of it. So again, let's just not talk about this stuff. Again, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Have a nice day or night, and see you in the next session. Bye.